I'm sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the muted TV. Megan's not home again, and it's already past 9. She said she'd be late, something about another work dinner, but the excuses are starting to sound like a scratched record. I've been trying to shake this feeling, but it's like an itch in my mind that I can't scratch. It's been months now, late nights, vague plans, the cold shoulder. I'm not stupid, but I've been telling myself I'm just being paranoid. That's what she keeps saying anyway. Greg, you're overthinking. It's just work. You need to relax. That's what she told me last week when I asked her about it. The way she avoided my eyes, though, that stuck with me. She's lying, I know it. There's something going on. I turn my attention back to the TV, but I'm not watching. My thoughts are stuck on Megan, how she's been different lately. It's not just the nights out. She's on her phone constantly now, and every time I glance over, she angles it away, like she's protecting a secret. A few weeks ago, I noticed she started locking her phone too. That's not like her. She used to leave it out, open for both of us. Now it's glued to her hand or face down on the table. The thought hits me hard. She's cheating. I almost say it out loud just to hear how ridiculous it sounds, but it doesn't feel ridiculous anymore. I run my hands over my face, frustrated. Am I imagining this? Or am I finally seeing things for what they are? It's hard not to think about how it used to be between us. We were good together once. Hell, we've been married for 8 years, and sure, every couple has their rough patches. But this feels different. She's distant, disconnected. The warmth is gone, and all I've got left is this gut feeling that keeps telling me she's hiding something. I shake my head, getting up from the couch and pacing around the living room. No, I'm not going to sit here and wonder anymore. I'm not going to be the fool, waiting around for answers that she's never going to give me. I need to know. I have to know. That's when I make the decision. I grab my phone off the coffee table and sit back down, my heart pounding in my chest. Megan's supposed to be at this dinner, right? I opened the tracking app I installed on her phone last week. I feel a bit guilty about it, like I'm invading her privacy, but I don't care anymore. Something's wrong and I need to figure out what. I stare at the screen as her location pin pops up. My heart skips a beat. She's not at the restaurant she said she'd be. She's across town, near a hotel, the kind of place where no one asks questions. I feel my throat tighten, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. It's one thing to suspect. It's another thing to see the proof staring back at you. My hand tightens around the phone, and for a moment I consider calling her, asking where she is. But I know she'll lie. She's gotten good at it. Instead, I stand up, grab my car keys, and head for the door. If she's at a hotel, I'm going to find out exactly what she's doing. No more guessing. The drive across town feels like an eternity. My hands are tight on the steering wheel, my knuckles white as I try to keep my mind from spiraling. I don't even know what I'm going to say when I get there. Maybe I won't say anything. Maybe I'll just sit in the parking lot and watch. Catch her in the act. But as I pull up to the hotel, my heart pounding in my chest, I see her right through the large windows of the hotel bar. She's not sitting with coworkers like she said she would be there to. She's sitting with him. Mark, I recognize him immediately. She introduced him to me a few months ago. Just a friend from work, she said. They're sitting too close, their legs almost touching. She's laughing at something he said, her head tilted just the way she does when she's flirting. His hand is on her knee, subtle but intimate. I feel the blood drain from my face, but I don't move. I don't make a scene. Instead, I sit there in my car, staring through the window, watching everything I thought I knew unravel in front of me. She's not even trying to hide it. She doesn't care if anyone sees. She doesn't care if I see. My mind races, a dozen thoughts fighting for attention. But one thing stands out. She's been lying to me for months. All the excuses, the late nights, the cold looks, it all makes sense now. I'm not paranoid. I was never paranoid. I watched them for a few more minutes, my stomach twisting into knots. This is real. She's cheating on me right there in the open, like it's the most normal thing in the world. Something snaps inside me. I can't just sit here anymore. I've got to do something. Without thinking, I push open the car door and stride toward the hotel entrance. My pulse is racing, my palms sweaty, but I'm done standing on the sidelines. As I walk through the lobby, I can feel my heart pounding in my ears. My thoughts are a blur of anger, betrayal, and something else, something cold and calculated. I walk into the bar and head straight for their table. Neither of them notices me at first. Megan is too busy gaggling at whatever Mark is saying, her hand resting casually on his arm. I stop a few feet away from them, just close enough for Megan to look up and see me standing there. For a second, her smile falters. But then, to my surprise, she doesn't even try to act guilty. She just smirks, leaning back in her chair as if she's been caught doing something trivial. I feel the muscles in my jaw clench. "Greg," she says, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "What are you doing here?" I stare at her, my mind racing, but the words are hard to find. She's not even trying to explain herself. Not apologizing, nothing. It's like she doesn't even care. That smug smile on her face, like she's won some twisted game, makes me sick. "I followed you," I say finally, my voice low but steady. "I wanted to see where you'd actually be tonight." Megan laughs. She laughs. Not nervous, not ashamed, but genuinely amused. "Well, now you know," she says, her eyes flicking toward Mark. "I guess you figured it out. You were never enough for me, Greg." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I don't flinch. I won't give her the satisfaction. I reach into my pocket, pulling out my phone, and hit record. I don't even care if anyone else in the bar is watching. Her eyes widen, but only for a second before she rolls them in annoyance. "Are you serious? You're going to record this?" she says, crossing her arms like a petulant child. "Yeah, I am," I say, my voice hardening, "because I want everyone to know exactly who you are." For the first time, I see a flicker of uncertainty cross her face. She glances at Mark, who looks just as uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Megan's confident facade is starting to crack. "Greg, come on, let's just talk about this," she says, her voice softer now. "But it's too late for that. I've seen enough." Without another word, I turn and walk away, leaving them both sitting there in stunned silence. I don't stop until I'm back in my car, my hands shaking as I fumble with my phone. The video is still recording, capturing the last few seconds of our conversation. I send it to every single one of our friends. Every last one. Let them see her for what she really is. Let them all know the truth. By the time I get home, my phone is buzzing with messages, but I ignore them. I've got all the proof I need. Tomorrow I'm filing for divorce. This marriage is over. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I just laid there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing 1,000 miles an hour. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Megan and Mark. Laughing together, touching, not a care in the world. It played over and over in my head like a bad movie, and no matter how hard I tried to shut it out, it wouldn't go away. By the time the sun started creeping through the blinds, I had made up my mind. This wasn't over. I wasn't just going to send out a video and walk away. I needed more. I needed to see her world come crashing down, just like she had torn mine apart. I wasn't going to be the guy who quietly disappears. No, I was going to make sure everyone knew what she'd done. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I checked my phone, a dozen missed calls from her, messages piling up. But I didn't care. I wasn't in the mood to listen to her lies. Instead, I focused on my next move. I got out of bed, my body stiff from hours of lying awake, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. As I waited for the pot to brew, I scrolled through my messages. Friends, family, everyone was reacting to the video. Some were shocked, some sympathetic. A few asked if I was okay, but most were too busy gossiping about the mess Megan had created. I didn't respond, not yet. I had bigger things to deal with. By the time Megan walked through the door, it was almost noon. She looked tired, her face pale, like she hadn't slept either. Good, I thought. She doesn't deserve a good night's sleep after what she's done. I didn't say a word as she stepped into the kitchen, her eyes darting around like she didn't know what to expect. "Greg," she started, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it before. "Can we talk?" I didn't even look at her. I just sipped my coffee, pretending she wasn't there. The silence was deafening, but I wasn't going to be the first one to crack. She didn't deserve that. I know you're mad, she continued, her voice trembling now. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. We can talk about it, work through it. I set my mug down on the counter, the sound of it hitting the granite louder than I expected. You think we can work through this? I said, finally meeting her eyes. After what you did? After the lies, the betrayal? You really think there's anything left to fix? Megan flinched at my words, her confidence from the night before completely gone. I made a mistake, Greg. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I scoffed. You didn't mean for it to go this far? You've been seeing him for months, Megan. Months. Don't act like this was some one-time slip-up. You made a choice. You chose him over me. She blinked, tears welling up in her eyes, but I wasn't going to let her off the hook that easily. Not after everything she'd put me through. I could see the panic starting to set in as she realized I wasn't going to forgive her. What do you want me to say? She asked, her voice breaking. What do you want me to do? I'll do anything, Greg. Just don't end this. Please. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction watching her squirm. For the first time, she wasn't in control. She wasn't calling the shots. I was. But I wasn't interested in her apologies. I wasn't interested in anything she had to say anymore. I'm filing for divorce, I said, my voice cold and final, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly why. The color drained from her face. No, Greg, please, she begged, stepping closer to me, her hands outstretched like she was trying to physically hold on to whatever was left of our marriage. Don't do this. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. I cut her off with a wave of my hand. It's too late for that. I've already sent the video to everyone. They all know what you did. You can't undo this. Her face twisted in horror as she realized what I'd done. You sent the video? She whispered, her voice barely audible. To everyone? I nodded, watching the panic rise in her eyes. Everyone. She staggered back, her hand flying to her mouth as if she was going to be sick. For a moment, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then I remembered what I'd seen, what she'd done, and any trace of sympathy vanished. I'm not going to fight you, I said, walking past her toward the door. I'm not going to argue, and I'm not going to listen to any more of your lies. You destroyed this marriage, not me. Now you're going to deal with the consequences. I left her standing there, tears streaming down her face, and walked out the door. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew this was only the beginning of what was coming for her. After I filed for divorce the next morning, the real fallout began. Megan's world started unraveling faster than I had expected. I blocked her number, deleted her from every social media platform, and cut off all contact. I didn't want her apologies or excuses. I was done with her. Friends who had seen the video were quick to spread the news. It didn't take long for the word to get out. People who didn't know us personally were talking about it. Some sent me messages of support. Others were clearly just enjoying the drama. Megan, on the other hand, had been thrown into full-on panic mode. She tried to reach out to me in every way possible, through mutual friends, even showing up at my workplace. But I ignored her. Every single attempt. I wasn't interested in what she had to say. I didn't care about her explanations. She'd had months to come clean, and she hadn't. Now she was going to deal with the aftermath. One day, about a week after I filed, I got a call from one of my friends, Jenna. She worked at the same company as Megan, and apparently the affair had started to bleed into her professional life. Rumors were swirling around the office, and people were starting to talk. It was only a matter of time before her bosses found out. You sure you want to keep pushing this? Jenna asked me over the phone. Things are getting pretty rough for her at work. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I'm sure she's getting exactly what she deserves. Jenna was quiet for a moment. I get it, Greg, I do. But are you sure you want to ruin her whole life? I mean, this is starting to affect her job. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Look, Jenna, I'm not going out of my way to ruin her career, but I'm not going to protect her either. She made her bed. Now she has to lie in it. I understand, Jenna said softly. I just wanted to check in. Let me know if you need anything. After we hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe things were spiraling out of control. But every time I thought about pulling back, I remembered that smug look on Megan's face when I caught her with Mark. The way she laughed at me, like she didn't care. That's what kept me going. That's what reminded me that she deserved this. A few days later, I found myself driving past the hotel where I had first caught Megan and Mark. I don't even know why I did it. Maybe I wanted to see if they were still meeting there. Maybe I just needed to remind myself why I was doing this. Either way, something inside me snapped when I saw Megan's car parked in the lot. I pulled into the parking lot, my heart racing as I sat in my car, staring at the entrance to the hotel bar. I didn't know what I was expecting to find. Maybe part of me wanted to catch her again, just to feel that same rush of satisfaction. Maybe I wanted to confront her, to see the panic in her eyes again. But after a few minutes, I realized that standing there, waiting, wasn't going to do anything. I'd already caught her once. There was no need to go through that again. Instead, I drove home, my mind racing with ideas on how to escalate things further. I wasn't done yet. There was still more to do, more ways to make her pay. I started digging deeper into Megan's life. I wanted to know everything. I checked her emails, her social media accounts, even her work calendar. It was easy. I knew all her passwords. She hadn't bothered to change them, probably thinking I wouldn't go that far. But I did. That's when I found it. A message from Mark, sent a few days before I caught them at the hotel. They had planned another trip. This time, it wasn't just dinner or drinks. They were going away for the weekend, some conference in another city. Megan had booked the hotel and Mark had arranged the flights. My blood boiled as I stared at the screen. They were planning to get away like nothing had happened, like I didn't exist. It was like a slap in the face. I was fuming. I printed out the emails, saving copies to my phone. If I was going to burn her life to the ground, I was going to do it thoroughly. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about making sure she never got to enjoy anything from this affair. Not Mark, not her reputation, not her job. I called my lawyer that afternoon. I've got more, I said, my voice steady but cold. I want to make sure we use this. Megan's desperation became more obvious with each passing day. Her messages, coming through friends now since I'd blocked her, were getting more frantic. I'd hear about her crying at work, about how people were starting to avoid her. No one wanted to be associated with her now that her affair was public knowledge. Her once perfect world was collapsing around her, and I was more than happy to sit back and watch it fall. She begged for a meeting, said she needed to talk to me face to face, but I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. She could live with the consequences of her actions, just like I had lived with the lies. Every message she sent felt like validation for what I was doing. This wasn't just revenge anymore, it was justice. And I wasn't done yet. I knew the next step. Mark's wife. She had no idea what her husband had been up to, and I figured it was time she found out. I wasn't one to hesitate once I made up my mind, and telling Mark's wife was the next logical step. I had spent too long in the dark, and I wasn't going to let her stay there any longer than necessary. She deserved to know the truth. They all did. I started by digging around online. I found her easily enough. Her name was Sarah, and her social media profiles were public. It didn't take much to confirm she had no idea what was happening. Her posts were the usual: family pictures, photos of her and Mark smiling, celebrating anniversaries, vacations. The more I scrolled, the angrier I got. Here she was, living her life in blissful ignorance while her husband was sneaking around with mine. I wasn't going to let it stay that way. I debated sending her a message. I even drafted a few. Nothing too emotional, just the facts. But that didn't seem enough. I needed her to see the full picture, just like I had. So I gathered everything: screenshots of the emails, texts, and of course the video of Megan and Mark at the hotel. I compiled them into a neat little folder, cold and efficient. There would be no room for doubt once she saw what I had. By the end of the day, I had her work email, and that's where I sent everything. I wanted it to hit her where it hurt, just like Megan's betrayal had hit me. No preamble, no message attached, just the files. Let her open them and see the truth for herself. I hit send, and then I waited. It didn't take long. A couple of hours later, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. I knew it had to be Sarah. I answered, keeping my voice steady, waiting for the explosion. There was silence for a moment, just the sound of breathing on the other end. Then she spoke. "Greg?" Her voice was small, shaky, like she didn't want to believe what she had seen. "Is this real?" "Yes," I said, keeping my response short. There was no need to sugarcoat it. She deserved the truth, just like I had. Another long pause, and I could hear her trying to hold it together, her breath coming in shallow gasps. I don't know what to say." "There's not much to say," I replied, my tone flat. "It is what it is." I wasn't trying to be cruel, but I wasn't going to comfort her either. This wasn't my mess. It was Mark's and Megan's. We were just the collateral damage. "Thank you," she whispered after a while, her voice breaking. I needed to know." "You deserve to know," I said, then hung up. There was nothing more to talk about. I had done my part. After that, things started moving fast. I didn't hear much from Sarah, but I knew the bomb had been dropped. I imagined her confronting Mark, probably in some dramatic scene at their house, just like I had with Megan. The thought didn't bring me as much satisfaction as I thought it would, but it was done. There was no going back now. Megan, on the other hand, was in full-on meltdown mode. Every day I heard more stories through mutual friends about how she was struggling at work, how people were starting to avoid her, how she couldn't seem to hold it together. She tried reaching out again, sending more messages through friends, but I ignored every one of them. There was nothing she could say that would change what had happened. I had all the proof I needed. Her life was falling apart, just like mine had. One evening, about a week after I had sent everything to Sarah, I got a call from my lawyer. He had more good news. "You're going to want to sit down for this," he said, his voice casual but with a hint of excitement. "I got word that Megan's been suspended from work." I didn't say anything at first, just let the information sink in. Suspended? That was bigger than I had expected. "Apparently the rumors caught up with her," he continued. "HR got wind of the affair, and considering the mess it's made, they're investigating her conduct. It's not looking good." I leaned back in my chair, a grim smile tugging at my lips. This was it, the final piece of her life crumbling. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. Her whole career was on the line, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "She brought this on herself," I said finally, feeling the weight of satisfaction settle in my chest. "You're right," my lawyer agreed. "I'm asking." And that's not all. I've been in touch with her lawyer about the divorce. It's moving faster than expected, especially now that she's in panic mode. Looks like she's willing to settle just to get this over with. That was the final victory. That was the bun. Not only was she losing her reputation, but now she was desperate to end the marriage quickly, just to stop the bleeding. And I wasn't about to make it easy for her. A few days later, I heard from Jenna again. She had more updates on Megan's situation at work. "She's been officially let go," Jenna said over the phone. "HR finished their investigation. Apparently they found some other stuff too, like inappropriate expenses and shady dealings with clients. They used the affair as an excuse to dig into everything, and it just got worse from there." I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me. Megan had built her life around that job, around her career. It was the one thing she had always lorded over me, the one thing she thought made her better. And now it was gone. "How's she taking it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Not well," Jenna replied. "She's been a wreck. Some of her friends at work said she's been crying nonstop, trying to figure out what to do next. It's all anyone's talking about in the office. She's completely humiliated." Good. That's what I wanted. That's what she deserved. As the weeks passed, the divorce proceedings moved along quickly. Megan, in her desperation, agreed to everything my lawyer proposed. There was no fight, no drawn-out battle. She just wanted it over with, just wanted to move on. But I wasn't in any rush. I wanted her to feel every bit of pain, every consequence of her actions. I stayed distant through the whole process, never once engaging with her directly. It was all done through lawyers, and that's how I wanted it. Clean, efficient, no emotional mess. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me angry or hurt. I wasn't going to let her think she still had any power over me. The last time I saw her was at the final meeting with our lawyers. She looked different, defeated, worn down. Her once perfectly polished appearance was gone, replaced by someone who had clearly been through hell. Her hair was unkempt, her face pale and drawn. She looked like a shadow of the woman I used to know. We didn't speak. I didn't have anything to say to her, and she seemed too ashamed to look me in the eye. I signed the papers, watched as she did the same, and then it was done. 8 years of marriage reduced to a few signatures on a stack of legal documents. As I walked out of the office, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. The nightmare that had consumed my life for the past few months was finally behind me. Megan was out of my life for good, and I was free. But as I sat in my car, staring at the divorce papers in the passenger seat, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of something else. Not regret exactly, but something close. Emptiness, maybe? I had won, sure. I had taken Megan down, destroyed her life just like she had destroyed mine. But now that it was over, now that I had gotten everything I wanted, there was a part of me that wondered what it had all been for. I had spent so much time, so much energy on revenge, that now, with it finally complete, I wasn't sure what to do next. The anger that had fueled me for so long was gone, and in its place was nothing. Just a hollow feeling in my chest, a reminder that while I had taken my revenge, it hadn't fixed anything. It hadn't made the pain go away. I took a deep breath and started the car. I couldn't think about that now. I had won, and that was all that mattered. The rest would have to wait. A few days after the divorce was finalized, I got an unexpected phone call. It was from Sarah, Mark's wife. "Greg, I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice calm but filled with emotion, "for telling me the truth, for giving me the chance to make my own decisions." I hadn't expected to hear from her again, but there was something in her voice that told me she had found some kind of peace in all this, even if it had come at the cost of her marriage. "I'm glad I could help," I said, unsure of what else to say. "I'm filing for divorce too," she continued. "I can't stay with him after everything that's happened, but I wanted to let you know that you did the right thing. You gave me the chance to take control of my own life." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I'm sorry it had to come to this." "Me too," she replied, and I could hear the sadness in her voice. "But at least now we can both move on." After we hung up, I sat there for a while, thinking about what she had said. Maybe she was right. Maybe now we could both move on. Maybe now that it was all over, we could start fresh. But as I sat there, staring out the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been lost in the process. Something that no amount of revenge could bring back. Still, I had my freedom, and that was enough. For now. As the days passed, I slowly started to rebuild my life. The anger that had driven me for so long was gone, and in its place was a quiet sense of resolve. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done with the past. Megan was out of my life for good, and Mark was dealing with his own fallout. Sarah had made her choice, and I respected that. We were all moving on in our own ways. And as for me, I was ready to start over, ready to build something new. Something better. I didn't know where the road would lead, but I knew I was finally in control of my own life again. And that was all I needed. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and silence. Megan's attempts to reach me had dwindled to nothing, and any word I heard about her was filtered through mutual acquaintances or the occasional update from Jenna. I wasn't actively seeking out news about her, but there was something satisfying about hearing how everything was unraveling for her, even if it came secondhand. The divorce was on the fast track. Megan had agreed to everything. She didn't have the fight in her anymore. She couldn't afford to. Between her public humiliation, losing her job, and the collapse of her social life, she had become a shell of the person she used to be. I had crushed her, just like I had planned. But now, with the end in sight, I was already thinking ahead. I knew there was one final move to make, and I had been waiting for the right moment to pull it off. Mark had been remarkably quiet throughout the entire ordeal. Unlike Megan, he hadn't tried to reach out or apologize. I had expected him to grovel, maybe send some pathetic excuse or attempt at a peace offering, but there was nothing. At first I thought maybe he was trying to lay low, hoping I wouldn't come for him next. But the more I thought about it, the more it pissed me off. He was just as guilty as Megan, if not more. He had watched my marriage fall apart, had been complicit in every lie and secret meeting, and yet here he was, thinking he could get away with it. That's what really got to me. His arrogance. His belief that he could walk away unscathed while Megan took the fall. I wasn't going to let that happen. I had kept my distance from him after sending the evidence to Sarah. But now, as the dust settled and Megan's life lay in ruins, I knew it was time to finish what I started. Mark needed to pay for what he had done, and I had the perfect way to do it. Sarah had been quiet since our last conversation. I hadn't expected to hear from her again, and honestly, I didn't want to get too involved in her situation. We had both been through enough. But as the final pieces of my plan started to fall into place, I realized she might be the key to taking Mark down for good. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about ensuring that neither Megan nor Mark could rebuild the lives they had destroyed. I had come this far, and I wasn't going to leave any loose ends. I dialed Sarah's number, unsure of how she'd react to hearing from me again. The phone rang a few times before she picked up, her voice cautious but calm. "Greg?" "Hey, Sarah," I said, trying to sound as casual as possible. "I was just checking in. How are you holding up?" There was a pause, and I could hear her sigh softly on the other end. "I'm managing," she said. "It's been tough, but I've made my decision. I'm filing for divorce. Mark doesn't know yet." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I'm sorry it had to come to this, but I think it's the right move." "I know," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "It's just hard to let go of everything. But after what he did, there's no going back." "Listen, Sarah," I said, shifting gears. "I wanted to ask you something. I've been thinking about Mark and everything that's happened. He's gotten off too easy in all this. Megan's life is in shambles, but Mark, he's still out there, pretending like none of this is his fault. He needs to face the consequences, too." There was a long silence on the other end. I could tell Sarah was weighing her response carefully. "What are you suggesting?" she asked finally. "I want to make sure he doesn't get away with it," I said, my voice firm. "And I think you can help me." The plan was simple, but it required Sarah's cooperation. She wasn't thrilled about getting involved at first. Understandable, given everything she had been through. But as I laid out my plan, I could hear the shift in her tone. She wanted justice just as much as I did. And once she realized this was the only way to ensure Mark paid for what he had done, she agreed. The next few days were all about preparation. Sarah and I kept in close contact, exchanging information and planning every detail. I knew Mark would never see it coming. He was too busy trying to pretend everything was fine, too arrogant to think anyone would go after him now that the dust had settled. But that was the beauty of the plan. He had let his guard down, and we were going to hit him where it hurt the most. Sarah told me about the business conference Mark had been planning to attend. It was the same conference he had booked with Megan before everything fell apart. Apparently, he was still going, thinking it would be a good distraction from the chaos back home. That was our in. We decided to time everything perfectly so that the fallout would happen when he was miles away from home, completely unprepared for the storm that was about to hit. While Mark was at his conference, Sarah would file for divorce and expose the affair publicly. She had already collected enough evidence to back it up, and with the video I had provided, there was no way he could deny it. But that wasn't the only part of the plan. Sarah had friends in Mark's industry, people who could easily spread the word once the affair became public. It wouldn't take long for the gossip to circulate, and soon enough, Mark's professional reputation would be in ruins. He had built his career on trust and relationships, and once his colleagues found out what he had done, there would be no recovering from it. It was the perfect revenge. The night before the conference, I met up with Sarah in person for the first time. We kept it brief, exchanging final details and going over the timeline one last time. There wasn't much left to say. Everything was in motion now, and all we had to do was wait for the fallout. "I hope you're ready for this," I said as we stood outside the coffee shop, the chill of the evening air settling around us. "Once it starts, there's no turning back." "I know," she replied, her expression determined. "He deserves everything that's coming." I couldn't help but admire her strength. Sarah had been through hell, just like I had, but she wasn't backing down. She wanted justice just as much as I did, and together we were going to make sure Mark paid for what he had done. We parted ways, both of us knowing that the next few days would change everything. The morning of the conference, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The anger that had been boiling inside me for months was gone, replaced by a cold sense of purpose. I had done everything I could to destroy Megan's life, and now it was Mark's turn. I didn't feel guilty, didn't feel conflicted. This was what needed to be done. I got a text from Sarah around noon. "It's done," that was all she said. But I knew exactly what she meant. She had filed for divorce, and the papers were on their way to Mark. By the time he got home from the conference, his entire life would be in shambles, just like Megan's. But the best part was yet to come. While Mark was at the conference, completely unaware of what was happening, Sarah started leaking the affair to his colleagues. She didn't hold back, sending the video, emails, in every sordid detail to the people who mattered most in Mark's industry. It didn't take long for the rumors to spread like wildfire, and by the end of the day, everyone knew. Mark's phone must have been blowing up with messages and calls, but he wouldn't find out why until it was too late. The fallout was swift and brutal. Sarah called me the day after Mark returned from the conference, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "He's losing everything," she said, not even trying to hide her glee. "He came home to find the divorce papers waiting for him, and by the time he checked his phone, the entire industry knew about the affair. He's been blacklisted from half his clients already." I couldn't help but smile as she recounted the details. Mark had thought he could escape the consequences, thought he could walk away without a scratch. But now his professional life was in ruins, his marriage over, and his reputation destroyed. It was everything I had hoped for. A week later, I got an unexpected call from Mark. I didn't recognize the number at first, but as soon as I heard his voice, the memories of that night at the hotel bar came flooding back. "Greg," he said, his voice strained and desperate, "we need to talk." I didn't say anything at first, letting him squirm in the silence. "I know you're behind this," he continued, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. "You and Sarah, you've ruined my life." I couldn't help but laugh at the irony of it all. "Ruined your life? You did that all on your own, Mark." "Listen," he said, his tone shifting to pleading, "I know I messed up. I shouldn't have gotten involved with Megan. But you don't have to do this. You've already destroyed Megan. Isn't that enough?" "No," I said, my voice cold and unwavering. "It's not enough. You stood by while my marriage fell apart. You didn't just get involved with Megan. You helped her destroy my life. Now, you're getting exactly what you deserve." Mark was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear him trying to come up with a response, trying to figure out a way to salvage the wreckage of his life. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry for everything." But it was too late for that. "I don't want your apology," I said, my voice hard. "I want you to live with the consequences of your actions, just like I had to." And with that, I hung up. I didn't hear from Mark again after that. Sarah kept me updated on the aftermath. He had been fired from his job, his clients had dropped him, and he was facing financial ruin. He and Megan were both living in the wreckage they had created, and there was no way out for either of them. As for me, I felt free. I had done what I set out to do. I had taken control of the situation. had exacted my revenge on the people who had destroyed my life. And now, with both Megan and Mark out of my life for good, I was ready to move on. There was no going back. The day of the divorce hearing arrived faster than I expected. It was strange knowing that this would be the last time I'd ever see Megan in any official capacity, that this moment would put an end to everything between us. Despite everything she'd done, I felt a numbness rather than the rage that had driven me for months. I'd gotten used to the idea that our marriage was dead, and today was just a formality. Still, there was something final about it that weighed on me as I made my way to the courthouse. Walking into that courtroom, it was like stepping into another world. The sterile air, the shuffle of papers, the bored glances from people who had no idea who we were or what had happened between us. It all felt surreal, but I wasn't there to feel anything. I was there to win. Megan was already sitting at the long wooden table with her lawyer when I arrived. I barely recognized her. Gone was the confident, put-together woman I'd known for years. In her place was someone I could only describe as broken. She looked disheveled, her hair pulled back hastily, dark circles under her eyes. Her gaze was downcast, avoiding mine. It was clear she had been through hell. A part of me thought about how this was exactly what I had wanted, to see her brought low, stripped of everything. But instead of satisfaction, I just felt cold. I took my seat next to my lawyer, who gave me a nod as if to say, "We've got this." I didn't need the reassurance, though. I knew we were going to win. The evidence was stacked against her, and Megan had already lost in every way that mattered. This was just the final nail in the coffin. The judge entered, and the room fell into silence. Megan's lawyer stood up first, making some weak argument about how the video I'd recorded was vindictive, that it painted her in an unfair light. I could barely listen. It was a pathetic attempt to gain some kind of leverage, but even they knew it wouldn't work. The truth was undeniable. My lawyer, sharp and composed as always, made our case quickly. He reiterated that the video wasn't an act of revenge, but a necessity, evidence to show exactly what had happened in our marriage. I sat there calm, arms crossed, while the judge listened carefully, occasionally nodding in agreement. I didn't need to say much. The facts spoke for themselves. Then came the moment of confrontation. The judge turned to Megan, her expression unreadable, but the weight of the situation was clear. "Mrs. Spencer," she began, her voice steady, "you've been presented with overwhelming evidence of infidelity and misconduct. Do you have anything to say before I make my ruling?" Megan's head was still down, her hands wringing together in her lap. She looked up briefly, meeting my eyes for the first time in months. Her lips trembled as if she was about to speak, but no words came out. It was as if all the fight had drained from her. She glanced at her lawyer, who gave her a slight nod, urging her to say something, anything. Finally, she spoke. I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never meant for it to get this far." Her apology hung in the air, weak and hollow. I felt nothing. There was no room for forgiveness, no chance to undo what had been done. She had betrayed me, and now she was paying the price. It was too little, too late. The judge, unimpressed, nodded slowly. "I've reviewed the evidence, and it's clear that this marriage has broken down irreparably due to your actions, Mrs. Spencer. Given the circumstances, I see no reason to grant you any spousal support." Her words were final, cutting through the room with a cold precision that left no room for argument. I could see the color drain from Megan's face as the realization hit her. This was it. She had lost. Not just me, but everything, her marriage, her reputation, her career. She had nothing left to hold on to. Her lawyer muttered something quietly, trying to salvage what little dignity they had left. But it didn't matter. The decision had been made. The divorce was finalized, and with it, any remaining ties between us were severed. As I stood up to leave, I glanced back at Megan one last time. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, almost fragile. For a split second, I wondered if this was what I had really wanted. But then I remembered the months of lies, the nights spent wondering where she was, the humiliation of finding out about her affair in the most public way possible. No, I didn't regret a thing. I walked out of that courtroom with my head held high. It was over. The weeks that followed were strange. I thought I would feel more, some sense of triumph, maybe even relief. But instead, I just felt empty. Megan was gone from my life, and the anger that had fueled me for so long had finally burned out. There was nothing left. I had won, but at what cost? I threw myself into work, trying to keep busy, trying not to think too much. My friends were supportive, checking in on me, but there was only so much they could do. The truth was, I had spent so much time plotting my revenge that I didn't know how to move on from it. My life had revolved around Megan and Mark for so long that I didn't know what to do without them. One evening, I was sitting at home, nursing a drink when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jenna asking if I wanted to grab a drink with her and some of our mutual friends. I hesitated for a moment, then replied with a quick, "Sure." I needed to get out, to be around people, to remind myself that there was more to life than what had happened over the past few months. We met up at a small bar downtown, the kind of place that was loud enough to drown out any thoughts, but quiet enough to still have a conversation. Jenna was already there when I arrived, sipping on a cocktail and chatting with some of the others. She waved me over with a smile. As I sat down, she gave me a knowing look. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her tone casual but concerned. I shrugged. "I'm managing." She nodded, her expression softening. "It's been rough, I know. But you did what you had to do. Don't second guess it." I smiled faintly. "I'm not. It's just weird, you know? I thought I'd feel more." Jenna took a sip of her drink and leaned in slightly. "That's normal. You've been through a lot. It's going to take time." We talked for a while longer, the conversation drifting between work, life, and everything in between. It felt good to be around people again, to feel like maybe things were starting to get back to normal. But even as we laughed and joked, there was still that nagging emptiness inside me, that feeling that something was missing. As the night went on, Jenna leaned over again, this time lowering her voice. "I heard from a friend that Megan's really struggling. Apparently she's lost most of her friends, and things aren't looking good for her career." I didn't say anything at first, just nodded. I knew she was telling me this to make me feel better, to remind me that I had won. But the truth was, it didn't matter anymore. Megan was no longer part of my life, and whatever happened to her was out of my control. I had done what I set out to do. Now it was time to move on. After a few more drinks, I decided to call it a night. As I walked home, the cold night air biting at my skin, I thought about everything that had happened. The divorce, the revenge, the destruction of Megan's life. It was all behind me now. But instead of feeling victorious, I just felt tired. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the courthouse, a formal notification that the divorce had been finalized and everything was in order. I stared at it for a while, feeling the weight of it in my hands. This was it. The official end. I placed the letter on the counter and walked over to the window, looking out at the city below. Life was moving on, people were going about their days, completely unaware of what I had been through. In the grand scheme of things, my story was just one of many, a blip in the chaos of the world. But to me, it had been everything. As I stood there, I realized something. I had spent so much time focused on Megan, on what she had done, that I had lost sight of myself. I had let her betrayal define me, had let it consume me, but now, with the divorce finalized, I was free. Free from the lies, free from the anger, free from the toxic relationship that had nearly destroyed me. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew I had to start rebuilding. Piece by piece, I would put my life back together. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone take that from me. I walked back to the counter, picked up the letter, and filed it away. It was just a piece of paper, a formality. The real work was just beginning. As I sat down at my desk, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I stopped when I saw an old friend's name. We hadn't spoken in a while, but he had reached out to me recently, offering a new opportunity, something that could help me start fresh. Without hesitation, I tapped on his name and hit call. As the phone rang, I felt a small spark of hope ignite inside me. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. I sat there, phone still in my hand, after the call ended, and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Possibility. It wasn't the overwhelming rush of excitement I'd expected, but a quiet sense of opportunity. I had been so focused on revenge and the chaos that came with it that I'd forgotten there was life after all of this. But here it was, an opening, a way forward. The next morning, I made a conscious decision to start fresh. My routine for the past few months had been robotic: work, home, and the occasional drink with friends, but always with that lingering sense of unfinished business hanging over my head. Now that the divorce was finalized, it was like a door had finally closed behind me. Megan and everything that had come with her was firmly in the past. The call from my old friend had been about a business opportunity, something small but with potential. It wasn't a major life change, but it was enough to get me thinking differently. He needed someone with sales experience to help him launch a new venture, and I had nothing holding me back anymore. I wasn't tied to the past, wasn't tied to Megan's lies, or the resentment that had built up over time. I could make my own choices again. I spent the next few days mulling it over, talking it through with Jenna and a couple of close friends. "Why not go for it?" Jenna had said over dinner one night. "What do you have to lose?" She was right. What did I have to lose? I shot my friend a text later that night telling him I was in. It wasn't long before I found myself excited about something other than Megan's downfall. The idea of starting fresh, with no one else's baggage weighing me down, was liberating. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into the new project. It was challenging, but it felt good to be working towards something that was just mine. No drama, no deception. Just a chance to build something from the ground up and focus on the future. It wasn't easy, though. There were still moments when I'd think about everything that had happened, times when I'd wonder how things could have been different. But those thoughts came less and less often. Every day felt like a step toward reclaiming my life. Jenna and I stayed close during this time. She had been there through it all, and we had built something of a solid friendship out of the mess. She understood me in a way that few people did, probably because she'd seen the whole thing unfold firsthand. One night, after we'd finished grabbing drinks with a group of friends, Jenna and I sat outside the bar, the cool night air wrapping around us. "You've come a long way, Greg," she said, taking a sip of her drink and looking over at me. "I know it probably doesn't feel like it yet, but you're getting there." I nodded, staring off into the street. It's weird. For so long, I was fueled by anger, by the need to get back at her. Now that it's all over, I'm just figuring out how to be normal again. She smiled. Normal is overrated. We laughed, and for the first time in a while, it wasn't forced. It felt real. As the weeks passed, life slowly began to take on a new rhythm. The new business was doing well, and I was finding my stride again. The days felt lighter, and I could finally look at my future without feeling like it was tied to what Megan had done to me. I was building something, piece by piece. One evening, I got a message from Sarah, Mark's ex. It had been months since we last spoke, and seeing her name pop up on my phone caught me off guard. "Hey, just wanted to check in. Hope you're doing well. I heard you're doing great with the new job. Congrats. Let's catch up sometime if you're up for it." It was strange hearing from her again, but not unwelcome. We'd both been through similar hells, and while we hadn't stayed in touch, there was still a bond there, something that connected us in the mess that had been our lives. I replied, keeping it short but friendly. I wasn't sure if I wanted to revisit everything we'd been through, but it was nice to know she was doing okay too. We'd all moved on, it seemed, in our own ways. By the time I hit the 3-month mark at the new job, I barely thought about Megan or Mark anymore. They were like ghosts from another life, shadows of a time that no longer had power over me. It was strange how quickly things shifted once I let go of the bitterness. Once I realized that their actions didn't define me anymore, I was free to define myself. One night, I found myself back in my apartment after a long day at work. I sat by the window looking out at the city lights, and for the first time, I felt a real sense of peace. Not just relief that everything was over, but actual peace. I had spent so long chasing revenge, trying to destroy the people who had destroyed me. But now, with all that behind me, I realized that the real victory wasn't in the revenge itself. It was in taking control of my life again. Megan had thought she could break me, but in the end, I had broken free from her completely. I wasn't the person I had been before all of this. I was stronger, more resilient, and more importantly, I had learned that my life didn't have to revolve around someone else's betrayal. The months that followed were some of the best I'd had in years. I traveled a bit, threw myself into work, reconnected with old friends. Life wasn't perfect. It never is, but it was mine again, and that was all I needed. As time went on, the pain of what Megan had done faded into the background. It didn't disappear completely, but it stopped being the thing that defined me. It was just another chapter in my life, one that I had closed and moved past. Looking back, I realized that while the revenge had been satisfying in the moment, the real victory had been in reclaiming my life, in choosing not to let her lies and betrayal be the end of my story. I had won, not because I had destroyed Megan and Mark, but because I had chosen to build something new for myself. One evening, I got another message from my friend, the one who had brought me into the new business. He was throwing a small get-together for everyone involved in the project and wanted me to come. "You've been killing it, man. Can't wait to celebrate with you." I smiled, feeling that small spark of excitement again. Life had a way of moving on, and so had I. As I got ready to head out, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I looked different, not just older, but more sure of myself. The man staring back at me wasn't the same guy who had been wrecked by his wife's affair. He was someone who had faced the worst and come out the other side stronger. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door, feeling like for the first time in a long time, the future was wide open. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. And I was ready for whatever came next.